Okay, so this week we're going to take a more of a focus on just describing what the journey is and all that goes into it. So we decided to start off with explaining what is needed to go on this journey. Um why don't Camille, why don't you explain like your journey or a little bit about like what you're going through so that we can tie any strengths and weaknesses to it?
Yeah, sure. M- my journey as it pertains to, I guess, you know what? No, this is how I define it. The way I define my journey is just kind of getting to what I feel is my truest self. I'm not sure if other people feel this way, but that directly aligns with the type of work that I do day to day. So what my journey has been like, it's been rocky as I can imagine it is for most people. It started off, I think, a lot earlier than I like to admit, but the culmination of it was me quitting my job, my full-time job last year that I was at for like 12 years, that I was really successful at, and kind of just almost starting from scratch, or maybe not in terms of, I guess, work, but starting from scratch in terms of like revisiting why and what I like to do, what I'm good at, what I hate doing. And it's just kind of been like an ongoing process from there. I don't think that the journey ends until you die. That's just how I feel. But yeah, it's just kind of been this ongoing process of figuring out um, and eliminating what doesn't speak to me and what aligns with my truest, highest self.
So that journey, that definition of journey is not limited to like just finding a different job or um like I don't living a different lifestyle. It's kind of a culmination of everything, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just one thing. It's a lifestyle basically.
Absolutely. And just to kind of help, I guess, for whoever's listening to visualize what I'm describing, like, because lifestyle can mean anything. I'm gonna like bring it back to like my old corporate days where like I used to do goal setting with people. I think about like four quadrants. There's finances, there's career, there's development, and then there's personal. So it kind of touches on each of those four quadrants. Like you said, just like career to just like how I live day to day.
So that's like for everyone out there, like when we refer to like our journey, that's kind of an idea of what we're referring to. It's not like a journey to a destination. It's not like a journey to, a different country. It's like a journey to a different lifestyle than what we're living or what we have been living. And so today we want to share any strengths and weaknesses to help with that. Usually when we think of like strengths and weaknesses, it feels like we're in an interview and someone's asking you, what are your strengths and weaknesses for this job? And you have to create stuff that relates to it. Like I'm really good at, Excel sheets. I'm really great with like Microsoft Suite. And, you know, in interviews, I'm not going to lie, like I've bullshitted so many like answers because I know this is what they want to hear because it pertains to the position that I'm working for. Um, and I know a lot of people struggle with answering that question because they make it up because they're just saying what this person wants to hear to get the job. So, but there are strengths and weaknesses that are worth highlighting in life so that we can improve. So Camille, what do you think are some strengths and weaknesses um, that's going to help you on your journey to like a better life?
It's a really good question. I feel like my strength and weakness are similar. I have a few. I'm going to highlight one that I feel rides the line. Um, and it's my ability to oversimplify things. I feel like as a weakness, because it functions as both a strength and weakness for me, as a weakness, this prevents me from like working with people sometimes because
Interesting.
I feel like people have a tendency to complicate ideas, thoughts, processes, and I find it's very difficult, although possible, and I can do it and I have done it. It it is frustrating for me to help people to simplify their way of thinking. And it takes a lot of time because for whatever reason we're conditioned to just not think that way. And I know that's very vague, but it can be applied to a few different scenarios. Just to give like a real life example, like when I used to manage a fitness facility, um, I would really just break things down to like the bare basics and like the bare minimum so that we would always keep ties to the message of the company, the vision of the company, and the ties to each individual's goals. But sometimes like they get caught up in like the details or the hustle and bustle of the day to day or whatever drama is going on at the time. So to like scale back and like literally like cut down the trees or the bush and go through the rubble to like get to that basic thought or that why or that anchor is a struggle in itself. So I find that um, in my current life, I'm hesitant to work with people for that reason because of my past experiences. I'm not always motivated just because of my own energy levels, not always motivated to help people navigate through that, if I'm being honest.
Okay, so you're saying that your strength is to like break things down that are generally more complicated for understanding. But you're saying that you don't always leverage that strength because of those examples that you gave?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure if maybe I'm explaining this correctly. You're right, that is what I mean, but I feel like it's also a weakness for me because it prevents me from collaborating with people.
Okay.
I have said no to working with people because I don't want to leverage that strength, and I don't have the energy to do it. And on the reverse, um, I also feel like it's a weakness, this oversimplification, because I feel like sometimes, and I can catch myself in the moment, and I've apologized, but I don't think I always catch it. I feel like when I'm talking to somebody who's going through an issue, I mistake that as them asking for help
Mm-hmm.
and offer a simplified solution to what is not a simple problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if someone is depressed or like they're going through a rough time and they really just want to vent, I don't think I'm the right person to talk to because I don't always recognize that this is just a time for me to keep my mouth shut. I sometimes assume, which is not a good thing, that this person is asking for help. And I'm like, I know that I've provided information to people that people were not ready to hear, were not
Right.
trying to hear, they just wanted me to listen. So I think it functions as both a strength and a weakness for me
Okay.
because
And this,
it makes me less empathetic. If that's it makes me come across as empathetic. Sorry, not empathetic, apathetic. Actually, there you go.
okay. So tying that together to the theme of a strength for living um like a different lifestyle,
Mhm.
like tied together for us.
Like, how has that helped me? I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Without sounding too like hippy dippy or woo woo or whatever you want to call it, I do think that although sometimes it functions as a weakness for me, it is a way of protecting my energy because I don't feel like everyone needs to hear me oversimplify or explain basics to them. That's not always my role. From a strength perspective, the way that it's helped me in my journey is um, in moments of darkness or moments of deep thought or in moments which are usually moments that I need to pivot, in which I need to pivot, I've been able to like sit down, clearly identify what's bothering me, whether that's a complicated feeling or not, and then break down the steps to help me get out physically and mentally and emotionally get out of that. It's not easy all the time, but because I know how to break things down and I know how to like identify that, it has been, I don't want to say easy, but it has helped me to bring myself out of darker places mentally and
Right.
emotionally.
Right. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, another context that that would come in would be, let's say you are trying to start a restaurant, right? Like lots of permits, processes, regulations that you need to know. That strength would help you figure out, okay, what's the big picture of what I'm trying to do? What are the tiny boxes that I have to check off to get to that big goal? So your strength of oversimplification helps you kind of um navigate more easily, like step by step, instead of being like, here is a big scary monster and it's just like a big ball of yarn and I can't untangle it. So
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
definitely a strength for anybody else out there. I think another like great reason why we're doing this is that a lot of people have a hard time recognizing their strengths and weaknesses. And I think by you providing your examples, people can relate and say, "Oh, I do that too." Like I can very much like explain to someone something that's super complicated and they get it. So if you relate to like Camille's example or her line of thinking, then you too may have this strength of oversimplification, which can totally help you if you are like going to become an entrepreneur or something. Um, any other like strengths that you can think of that has helped you get to where you currently are?
For sure. And I just want to clarify, like some of these things, like they're soft skills that I can't really speak to how I got. Like maybe I was conditioned this way because of my upbringing or whatever. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that some people are like, well, how did you even come across this? But maybe we can cross that bridge another time. But to answer your question, another strength I have, I guess, is optimism. As far back as I can remember, I've always been a half glass full person, and I think that that's definitely something that I've used to take for granted until until recently, I guess, like my adult life, where I really needed it. As dark as my days were, and like believe me, they were really dark. I have always been able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So even on my dark days when I wasn't feeling motivated, I had like a little tiny nagging like thing that was telling me that this was temporary,
Mm-hmm.
which really helped me to be okay in the moment,
Yeah.
um, even if I didn't want to be, because I knew that even though I felt like this today, like the whole day, I wasn't going to feel like this forever. So I kind of just, it allowed me to accept what I was going through and what I was feeling for what it is. And because I accepted it or was able to accept it, I was able to move through it.
Yeah, that definitely
Because,
helps.
yeah. And I know it's easier said than done. So, I apologize to anyone out there who's like, I'm going through that and that's just not how I feel. I'm just speaking to my experience. I, and again, like, like, I know I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but that's essentially what happened. Like, dark day, tiny, tiny bit of optimism goes such a long way. And then over time, it just kind of got back to where it was or needed to be.
Yeah. For those people who are thinking like, well, that's not how it is, or I'm not just an optimistic person, um, that doesn't mean you can't get there. That's where the work comes in. That's where you're like, okay, I'm a very pessimistic person. How do I become optimistic? And in identifying that you are a pessimistic person, you know that you have extra homework to do to get to optimism. So it doesn't mean that you can't get there. It just means that um, you have to take a different route. Okay, so why don't we um, transition to some weaknesses that have like come up more or that you recognize more now that you're, answering the strengths and weaknesses question for yourself, not for like a job.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it kind of stems from the oversimplification because, or maybe even just like some underlying issues that I wasn't addressing at the time. Like I was depressed for a while, so I mistook that for like procrastination. Um, but I do think that procrastination exists in my life outside of the depression. Like I feel like because I oversimplify things, sometimes I feel like tasks don't need as much time as I think they do. So I'm known to work like last minute sometimes. And yeah, apart from that, I would say I think the lack of empathy that also stems from my oversimplification. That's not to say that I'm like some heartless person. I just feel like sometimes I have a hard time. I just know, sorry, that sometimes I have a hard time expressing empathy or even feeling empathy for people when I feel like their issue is simple. Even though I know as a logical, rational person that everyone's struggle has a different weight or every situation has a different weight for each person, but I'm just being transparent. And I feel like that's something that maybe some people can relate to, but yeah, that's just what it is.
And so tying that again back to your journey, this is a weakness like for collaborations, like you have a hard time working with people because
Yeah, so I've found that like I've employed like some contractors, for example, and like they sometimes like they'll do good work or like I reach out because their work is good, obviously. Um and then like something will happen or like it'll fall through or like they're not like working, like the contract doesn't start or something like that. And it's because like they're going through a rough time.
Mhm.
Um that we've talked about. And it's not that I'm not empathetic because I know like when you're going through a hard time, especially if you're depressed, like you can't get out of bed in the morning. But I feel like in those instances, like because I can only really say what I would do in that situation, like I wouldn't have accepted the job if I knew that I couldn't commit 100%. Like if I knew that I was going through a hard time, I wouldn't commit to something. That's probably not the best example, but it's the most recent one that I can think of.
Mhm.
And that these people are very talented, so I think that just with like a little bit of patience, like maybe I could have just it would work. So I am working on it. Like there are some that I'm like, okay, like let's just put a pin in it and like bookmark. Um, and on the reverse, yeah, I don't know. That's the most recent one I can think of.
Yeah, like mainly that weakness comes in like when you're working with someone and you can't necessarily see their point of view. Like I'm just
Yeah.
trying to like tie it to different context of not necessary or yeah, different context of like living
Yeah,
or the journey.
I think that's probably the best way to phrase it. Like I'm not
Okay.
always able to see things from their point of view. That's a really good way to put it because I can't. Like obviously they're going through something or something happened or whatever the case is. And like I get it. I've gone through that stuff. Like I understand from like a logical perspective, but like for whatever reason, like like I don't always empathize. I think because I actually don't know why. I think I just
Right.
don't empathize all the time because I feel like sometimes like I let my ego take over, actually. That's probably it. And I'm like, well, this person just didn't respect me enough to like tell me in the first place, or like this person didn't respect me enough to like, let me to reach out to me and tell me that like, this isn't working or whatever. Like why did it have to come this far? I don't
Right.
know.
Right. So just to like sum it all up for everyone, like we are going through some strengths and weaknesses for basically life and not necessarily a job position, which we are so accustomed to thinking about in that context. Like whenever anybody asks, like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I automatically go into like interview mode and I'm like, what do they want to hear? So it was great to have examples from Camille about like both ends of the spectrum for life. Like this isn't, or, the journey, whatever you want to call it. But these are strengths and weaknesses that are great to highlight and understand for life, to kind of like move you forward, no matter what you're doing, no matter if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, if you are trying to get another job or anything like that. Um, any last words that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, as part of my own ignorance, like I've scoffed at the idea of journaling in the past, but and as someone who used to keep like a religious diary in their teens, like I don't know why I felt that way. But realistically, I found that that helped me a little bit. So, I know there's some people out there who are not optimistic, as I described, like you're pessimistic. The first step is just recognizing that issue. So, congratulations. But in order to get to a better place, whether that's optimism or just something else, I feel like, journaling is very helpful. Like if you write down, I know that you hear this everywhere, but you won't know the power of it until you try. Write down 3 things that you're grateful for every day this week and just see how you feel at the end of the week.
Mhm. That's doing the work. Um, all right. So this is the end of our episode. Stay tuned for more. Um, yeah, we'll see you guys next week. All right. Bye.